How do you make comics without all the frustration, without feeling lousy and inadequate all the time? Join me, Jess Rulifson,
And me, Tom Hart.
on the Terrible Anvil. Each week, we build community and shift our mindset about what it means to make comics and art. We're working through the whole process, one piece at a time, turning our suffering and angst into fun and glee. Join us at sawcomics.org.
All right, Jess.
Here we are. I'm Jess Rulifson, and I'm here with my delicious co-host. I use Tom Hart.
Tom
I
Hart.
use a silly word every week. We're trying to delicious. Today is delicious. We were looking inside Prince's fridge before the call started. This is the Terrible Anvil. We're coming at you virtually from the Sequential Artist Workshop with 3 people in the audience. Thanks for being here. And we're talking about tabling, which seems sort of obvious, but I wanted to mention it because it's a section in the Bootlegger's Guide to Comics that's blank, and I need help. So help me write my book.
I love the transparency here, and I love that we're talking about like this is a way to sort of work through some of our ideas because in what we're talking about in making comics more accessible and less feeling bad, part of it is like, what do I do with my ideas? And sometimes it's like you find a friend to work them out with, or you find an easy way to sort through them, or you find an easy way to develop them. And maybe it's not all the usual, like you have an idea and then you grind it out. So I'm glad for that transparency. I like that you're like, I have a big blank spot. So that's why this call is here today. I keep blinking out visually because of this Prince background, but I'm going to leave it up. Okay. So tell us just what we're talking about again.
Well, 2 shout outs. Firstly, so this is an audio recording that will be archived via wherever you stream podcasts. So maybe you're enjoying it that way. It's also on the YouTube for the Sequential Artist Workshop, the channel on YouTube. And right now it's being live streamed apparently. So if you're enjoying seeing this that way, also hello, 3 hellos into the digital abyss. And unrelated, Olivier was at the Beguiling in Toronto, which is a comic book store, and a Tom doppelganger works there. So if you're in Toronto, go there and see if you can spot the Tom Hart lookalike who works there. Not related, but still, it's good. So on the topic of getting out of the house
Okay,
and
let's
going
get
to
it.
comic book stores, a great place to meet other cartoonists. Another great place you can meet other cartoonists, should you so choose. If you're not a social media sort of person, whether you are or you're not, maybe you've met people online and you'd like to meet them IRL in real life. You can go to a comic book convention. And I don't know who our audience is, but I'm assuming most of us know what that is. It's a a rented large venue space. Sometimes it's free to the public, sometimes they charge at the door. It's usually a weekend long thing for the medium to large ones, but sometimes it's a 1 day only afternoon and Saturday and a hyper local locale. There's different ways. There's international ones, so they can kind of appear wherever. So wherever you live, even if you're quite removed from physical society. You could probably find one nearish to your zip code. Is there one in Providence, Tom?
Yeah, there's one April 6th. It's called RISD Unbound. It's connected to the Rhode Island School of Design, and it's yeah. There's also the Queer Zine Fair in Providence, and there's just one train right away in Boston. Related to this, I guess, everything I know, at least from an early age, and I mean 20s, from an early age, everything I know through comics, right? So I knew about these festivals and these conventions, but what I didn't know is every industry has festivals and conventions. Your job could be like making candy wrappers, and there's a candy wrapper convention, probably an annual one that you have to go to. That's not like fun. It's like you go and talk about aluminum foil and stuff like that. And the conventions in America started out, there were a couple, the San Diego con started small, believe it or not. There were New York City ones that were mostly places to buy comic books in collector boxes. But now, like you said, there's tons, and it's great, and they're always popping up. You know why? The one reason they're popping up is because they're getting harder to get into. So other people are saying, I'm going to start my own festival. We're going to start our own that's less exclusive, or that is only for small publishers and things like that. But so where do we start?
I like that. And then also some of the
You
ones
don't.
I'm not even that old, I swear, but some of the ones I was like, "Oh, that was a cool festival." It doesn't exist anymore, like the Alternative Press Expo in, San Francisco.
Right.
I don't believe exists anymore. And then certain iterations of the Brooklyn Comics Art Festival or something. It's now Comic Arts Brooklyn. So
I
sometimes
forgot.
the people who run it, the hands change. MoCA in New York used to be run by the Museum of Comics and Cartooning Art, and then that museum got absorbed by the Society of Illustrators. So it's still called MoCA, but the Society of Illustrators run it. So those are like semi mid to large organizations. Sometimes comic book stores will kind of host or sponsor it and gather other sponsors. A lot of arts
Library.
table, yeah, libraries like TCAF's Toronto Comics Arts Festival is held at a beautiful library in Toronto. So there's also international festivals like Angoulême in Angoulême, France. The graphic medicine conference is happening this year in Ireland. It might have already happened or
Hmm.
it's happening very soon. Okay, so
Oh,
that's where it's all over the place. Go look. And then we were also talking about size and scale. Like, how big do you want your festival to be? Someone in the chat was like, I don't want to go to San Diego Comic Con, even though I'm geographically close to it because it's gigantic and enormous and amazing. The Eisner Awards are hosted there. It's a big, 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 giant multi-day situation. I think it's a week long. So you want something a little smaller, a little more intimate, a different socialization experience. There's plenty of those too. We kind of have to look around. So I just Googled comic book festival listings or directory or something like that, and Printed Matter, which is based in New York, I believe. They
uh-huh.
print small runs of artist books and comics. They had a list of book and zine fairs, and like Tom said, there's a festival for not only zines and comics, but for everything under the sun. And on that topic, we always talk about Tim Kreider. I hope he listens to at least one of these episodes. I was just talking about a Substack, The Loaf. Go subscribe, it's so good. He was talking a little bit. He has an essay called An Exciting Time, which feels like a mirror to our episode about um, the expectations of marketing your own work as a creator. And it's really, really fabulously written. It's full of wisdom and snark, according to one of the commenters in the comments. But he and the cartoonist Lisa Hannawalt went to a toy fair at the Javits Center, I believe, in New York City, probably over a decade ago now. And Lisa illustrated it, and it was published via the Hairpin. And it's so hysterical. It's two cartoonists at a toy convention. It's really weird, and the drawings are fabulous. So I'll put that in the recap for us if we want to enjoy. Someone was giving a shout out to
Hmm.
Renaissance fairs, also the great way to meet all kinds of people, and maybe other cartoonists are there, but it's harder to know who's a cartoonist at a non-cartoonist based festival. Okay, so that's where, I guess. But let's talk about when. When do festivals happen? Is there like a seasonality to festivals, Tom? Have you noticed? You were talking about it as like Stephen Bissett was saying it's kind of like the harvest coming in, but it happens multiple seasons a year. There's like spring and fall, I guess. What do you think?
In some summer, I think it just closes, just kind of shuts down in winter. But MoCA is happening next week, which is March 16th. A lot of the major ones, and then they sort of close down with some that happen. Like Short Run happens in November. That's in Seattle, so it's sort of March to November or something like that.
Yeah.
It's
And
a lot of
Angoulême is
work.
in January, which is a great cheap
True.
time to buy
Right.
airline tickets from the US to like Brussels or Paris.
So you mentioned, I heard you talking about meeting people, but I also think that a lot of people want to sell stuff. Are there other reasons to go? Because I think we should parse out those two things at the very least.
I'm typing that in.
I'll type it in. You answer
Our
the question.
our note taker is not here. We miss them, and they're coming back soon. But our chat where we keep our notes, so I can save it for the recap, is like comically sparse. So
I'll go. I'll
I
go.
was like meeting people, selling stuff. I was like, oh, that's going to be helpful for later. Yeah, why why go to this? Well, it's good. Like I said, it's good to get out of the house. It's what our parents tell us to do. Go outside, get some sun on your face, and go back indoors. And, well, it was weird. A lot of this stuff shut down during COVID because it's a great place to build your immune system because there's something called the con crud that almost everyone catches. And the larger the festival, the harder the virus. hardier the virus. I've gotten some amazing viral infections from mocha. And then I didn't get sick for like a year. So if you want to boost your immune system, it's a great place to do that. It can be a place to directly meet people and chat about your work and to see people. It's really weird, but theoretically you have like physical objects, usually zines, but maybe you have tote bags or t-shirts or something or posters, limited edition art books, there's all kinds of stuff, but you can see people touch your work, which so it kind of feels like a garage sale where you're like, "Ah, I hope I make that sale," like that Simpson scene. But yeah, it's kind of like being an indie musician and you're at the merch table. It's the merch table for a cartoonist. So there's a bit of commerce, but a little bit of socialization, or maybe I feel like both are always in play, but there's also great programming. And if you spent the money, it usually does cost money to table. Tabling means like standing behind the table and being a purveyor of comics. You can go as an attendee. You don't have to sell your own comics. A lot of people don't get into the festivals that are juried or curated, and they'll just put their zines in a backpack and pretend like they're there anyway. But now they're like in a mobile unit where they can wheel and deal and meet people, which could be a different experience. And but there's programming. So if you go as whether you're tabling or you're attending, the programming is generally included in the weekend, and so it's a great place to see creators from all walks of life and all levels of trajectories of professionalism, talking about their work, like big celebrities, like maybe actual celebrities, Hollywood celebrities at San Diego Comic Con, and then I don't know at SPX you might see Jaime Hernandez or something talk about their new graphic novel. The Brooklyn Book Festival is like programming for all kinds of literature, and then the panels are usually centered around genre. And I was lucky to do a panel there that was like nonfiction comics, but they had tons of comics programming for multiple weekends in a row, I think, or I feel like that lasts for like 2 weekends or something, or maybe I'm remembering it wrong. So some of these festivals have programming that stretches out the week prior, the week after. There's also like social mixers. So if the idea of going onto a convention floor and seeing dozens to hundreds of tables and lots of people sounds a little overwhelming. There's still too much to see. You could also go to the kind of pre-parties or post-parties or mixers, which sometimes are a little bit smaller. I always suggest bring a friend for any of these activities, especially if you're introverted, because then you have somebody to talk to. Like a great way to navigate a convention is to go with a friend. So when you see something, it's like going on an errand or going shopping. If you see something, you're like, oh, this is really cool. You can show it to your friend and have somebody to go get a snack with.
So let's say I want to sort of like follow the thread of it just helping you build community, right? So like we have an online community here, and lately when you go to cons, and by that I mean last couple of years or something, we see a lot of students and other community members come. They meet us for the first time in person. Additionally, they meet each other for the first time in person. It's wonderful. But you can also go there not knowing anybody, except, the one friend you said to bring, right? So you don't know anybody. And because everybody's there on the same ground and with the same sort of belief system, it's kind of like what I mentioned about Taylor Swift last time. 70,000 people all show up because they all know Taylor Swift is awesome. Here it's like, 700 people all show up because they believe in a certain kind of making of comics and graphic novels. So you at least have that common ground, and then you can share each other's work. You can say, here's what I did, here's what I did. And then friendships happen that way. Also, quote, deals happen that way. Like I got my first book deal, which was not much of a book deal. It was more like one person who happened to publish comics said, I'll publish your next one. Like it was that simple. But that happened because I went to a convention and gave him my self-published zine. And he said, and he read it and said, that was so funny. It made my soda come out of my nose or something like that. And then offered to publish my next one. And that was really wonderful. And I'm still friends with him, even 30 years later. He's publishing off and on. He hasn't published me in a long time, but and again, giving out work is a really, really, really great way to meet people. Asking them to buy your work is a more difficult way to meet people. I just sharing it by saying, here's something, can I give you this? Especially if it looks like that person might be interested, if that person is interested in what you do, if that person has work that has some similarities to what you do. Like, I mean, so many of my lifelong friendships started at conventions, especially the early days of SPX personally, but everybody probably has similar experiences who have been in comics for a long time.
Yeah, I think like if you've never taken a class, not to, again plug the sequential artist workshop, but if you've never taken a class at SAW, you can sort of be bedazzled or wow, amazing when you do take a class, you're like, wow, all these people are talking about comics and my family thinks I'm really weird or I can't relate in the same way on that level with that topic. So to
Right.
have to kind of be a given in a Zoom room via SAW, it's sort of the same experience in a convention where everyone's like in on it. And then there's also these like doorways to like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. What is a risograph? Or like, oh, how did they make
Mhm.
that? So it's almost feels like a museum. It's called an exhibition, expo, right? Exhibition, what is expo short for? Anyway, a place where people show stuff. Well, it's a show. So it's like a museum or it's an event too. So it can be a great way to if you're someone on a budget, which is every cartoonist I know, you can go, you can find a way, you can volunteer. That I started, I didn't have any, I mean, I say I didn't have any money in past tense, but it's a recurring theme. But I volunteered at festivals and then, the other half of the day, you volunteer for 3 hours doing something. It's a great way to talk to comic celebrities. I got to meet Phoebe Glockner. She doesn't remember it, but I was working the door at a comics festival in Brooklyn, and she was so nice. I was like, "Oh, this is really cool. See, wow, she has really great skin." Like just being near someone who makes comics, and then meeting other people who are volunteering and I don't know, feeling useful, but kind of seeing how it runs too is interesting. And sometimes you get a voucher or bag of free stuff or a snack or something. But so if you're really on a budget, I like that generally speaking, conventions are inclusive for a variety of income levels. And there's festivals that are also free to the public because they want people to show up. Tabling is sometimes cost prohibitive, but I've seen a lot of cartoonists if it's a very expensive table at a high profile show like the Small Press Expo or MoCA, there'll just be like 12 people behind half of a table and they'll rotate shifts, for the weekend. So something that costs hundreds of dollars, like $600 or something for half of a table, split 12 ways, let's do math. It gets cheaper. And then maybe you have friends you can stay with. So that's another way to like have an excuse to travel to a new place and meet people you know online. You're like, wait, doesn't Tom live in Rhode Island? Maybe I could stay on his couch. Um,
We had in my early days, I've been to the San Diego convention 2 or 3 times. I don't plan on ever going again, but that would be in the early 90s. And a bunch of us, and we were the weirdo indie cartoonist, but a bunch of us would all rent a single hotel room. And I mean, there were probably 12 people in a hotel room, and we would go specifically to the Embassy Suites. And the reason is the Embassy Suites would have free cocktails from 4 to 5 p.m. So we would all leave the convention's floor and just just have free cocktails and peanuts and other things for that 1 hour and then go back to the convention floor. But yeah, we are just sleeping on top of each other in this giant cave pile. But yeah, like you find ways to um to make it affordable.
it's a great way to find out which of your acquaintances snore when they sleep because
Oh dear.
I have been in convention hotel rooms, lucky enough to get like a sliver of a mattress and enjoying some slumber after a long day, and then being like, "Who is snoring?" And I was like in a room full of guys, and there was like one other woman, and they were the ones that was snoring. I was like, "Wow, I'm really gendering snoring here," but amazing, amazing snorer and cartoonist. I will not name. Um, Maybe
Amazing
it's me. I don't
snore.
know. My husband's always like, "Why are you breathing loudly?" Like, "Damn it. If you breathe,
Amazing snorer and cartoonist. I'm putting that in the chat.
yes,
Okay,
yeah.
but let's talk about selling stuff because some
Oh
people want
no.
to do that. It's all right. I'll handle the heavy lifting of this.
Help.
Maybe we can talk a little bit more about meeting people if you like.
No, let's talk about selling stuff because I
Okay.
just feel like
But I
a
do
lot's
want to reiterate in case we've been too like all over the place, but like it's just a great way to meet more people like you. And they're there, and you may be like, I'm gonna meet I'm gonna meet Malcolm Gladwell because he's I don't know, I'm trying to make up a famous person. I'm gonna meet some famous cartoonist. I'm gonna meet Alison Bechdel. That's my job. She's not gonna remember you, but you'll meet other people who are sort of at your level and maybe fans of the same things and working out the same problems. And those relationships and friendships will last. And they're really, really great.
yeah.
Um, okay, so selling things. Go ahead. That's it.
Oh,
Okay. All right. So
well, I will say, okay, so like generally speaking, if you're making physical copies of your work, we're talking about comics, but it could be like copies of t-shirts, whatever. It's physical objects that you have to schlep to the convention center. A lot of people will bring rolling suitcases with their goods. They might also have things shipped in advance if you're a big time artist and you got a lot of copies. So there's different ways to bring your stuff that you want to sell. Pricing stuff for conventions is tricky. Generally speaking, for me personally, the cost of printing and traveling will always be greater than how many copies I sell. And once I noticed that and made peace with that, I always had a good time at a convention and it became more like a social love letter to other cartoonists, like show up and have fun and see a lot of stuff and be inspired. I think I had a better time when I was going like with a ledger, a math ledger, like, okay, this is how much this costs, like really on a budget. I just always lose money when I try to make money, but there are returns that are invisible, like Tom said, these connections you make and the people you might collaborate with later on things like I think these are things that are harder to measure and it's good not to go in quite so like mercenary like I need to make money. Also, like even if you're making your own comics at your house or printing a limited run and using recycled paper or something that's more budget friendly, it still takes time to assemble a work and bring it. And then, let's say you price it up $4 or $3 or something. I've seen people like pick my work up that I don't know and just like throw it back down on the table in the pile and been like, oh my gosh, they didn't even look inside of it. And sometimes they will to be polite. I don't know. So it's a really weird experience to be on the other side of the table hoping for a sale. But then I would see, oh, there's that friend I haven't seen forever. I haven't seen them. I haven't seen them. And I would just start giving all my copies away. So the goal kind of became to like go home with a suitcase that didn't have any of my work in it anymore and was filled with other people's stuff. So you can trade, but you can also like buy stuff. Early on, a lot of stuff was like cash only. I never had cash. In addition to being broke, I rarely carried cash. So I'd have like, okay, $20, like a $20 budget. And then I'd walk around hundreds of tables and I'd be like, oh, it's a mass, like all the free stuff, the free postcards and buttons and stuff. So you can still walk away with stuff even on a budget. But once they introduced the credit card swiper, I made more sales, but I also lost more money because I was like, oh, I'm gonna go get that new, Anders Nielsen book for
yeah.
$40 or whatever it was.
Um, the experience I have, and I've seen on my end, I see on both ends, and is somebody picks up your work and they look through it and their eyes widen and you're like, ooh, and then they're like, where did you get this printed? Or
Oh yeah.
what kind of brush do you use? They really just want your secrets. And I'm not, and it's, yeah, it's usually like, where do you get it printed?
Yeah.
Um, and then they put it down. Oh, thanks.
There's also a phenomenon. Someone in the chat was like, for me, the worst one is when they stand there and read all of your books and then leave without even like taking a card or something free, which is very funny. But I've also seen people that were like very timid, like out of respect. They're like, you can just tell they're on a budget or they're just looking, so they'll keep their hands in their pockets and they'll just peer over and won't even open anything. So for like mid-sized festivals or smaller-ish festivals like Chicago or what's that cake? Chicago Alternative Comics Expo. Um, I was tabling with my buddy Mike, and we made a sign that says, "Please touch all the things." And then they kind of invited people to like take a look and not be afraid. And then it's also nice if you are interested in selling stuff, see what sells, but also like put things at different price points. You have a email mailing list, and if someone signs up, you give them something for free, or you have free postcards people could take. So little kids that come by or really old people on a social security budget, they have something they can take home to remember you by. And then you have stuff that's mid-range and maybe higher, fancier, like having a range of prices I've noticed has been really useful. Um, and I don't know, try not to compare yourself to someone who's like wildly successful, who's like doing really, really amazing risograph books and selling out of them. Because I'm like, maybe it's my price point. I should sell this for less. And then some people will sell stuff for like 50 bucks a pop and rake in the dough. I am not that person.
You know,
But both
one
are
thing,
valid. Both are valid. I'm just saying, don't judge yourself by the amount of money you make.
one thing to notice is that, like, let's just take SPX for an example. Inside that convention or inside that festival, there's like dozens, maybe even hundreds of other mini festivals going on. And those are just the smaller networks inside the bigger network. So it's not, you know, when you set up your table at SPX or wherever, you are not trying to win over the same blanket of people. You're hoping that inside that network, your network comes to you, or you meet up with your network and stuff like that. So in other words, they're going to be, you know, you're not competing. Jess Rellefson is not competing with the risograph wonderkind, you know, at the corner. Jess Rellefson is competing, maybe not competing at all. Maybe Jess Rellefson is, you know, waiting for the people who know her work or have heard about her work, her nonfiction work with veterans, or who have taken one of her classes and things like that. So like those people and those networks are sort of like mycelium. They're inside the other networks, and so that envy that we all get, and that you know, that comparing that we all get, is a little misplaced, and we have to sort of like get comfortable with like, okay, just, you know, my network is a different network. They know what their network is because they're selling like all the risograph prints to them or whatever. In the same way that, you know, like, you know, I don't do much with merch, right? But like the people who are selling like a gazillion like handmade little dolls or whatever, we're like, why didn't I bring a million gazillion handmade dolls? And it's because that's not that's not who we are, and that's not the people we're trying to connect with.
Well,
So
and if it's aspirational, if you see something that's like totally blows your mind, you'd be like, I'm gonna do that
right,
next year. Like
right,
take pictures of everything and then steal everybody's dance moves for next year. Sounds good. It's a great way to like refresh your practice if you've kind of been making stuff the same way and kind of taking certain parts of your process for granted in a comfortable way. There's nothing wrong with that, but seeing other people do crazy stuff or be commercially successful for better or worse can be sort of inspiring if that's not where you're at or everyone's on a different journey, right? So sometimes comparison can make you push your
right,
limits.
right, right. Yeah. Um, I wanted to mention just a couple anecdotes, and we can just riff on it in any way you like. But um, early on, actually, I'm going to mention Jason Shiga first. Um, at one of the early MoCAs in Lower Manhattan in the Puck Building, um, cartoonist Jason Shiga, who is really sort of a mad genius. He makes these very complicated books that are kind of like, he actually calls them computer programs. They're very complicated and interesting. And he's also like a really self-effacing guy, and he's kind of uh, he's, he feels harmless, and you know, and anyway, he didn't get a table at MoCA, but but it's New York City table outside of MoCA, right outside of MoCA, with his stuff, and he sold better than anybody because everybody went to his table. They had to get in. And a lot of times you're like, why am I in such a bad spot? Nobody's coming to my table. You know, I hope people can see me. You know, they're all standing in line for Raina Telgemeier, but they don't see my book or whatever. But everybody had to pass through Jason, and he sold like crazy that year.
That's
Anyway, it's
awesome.
worth
And you didn't have to
it's
pay any money to the
right,
festival.
right. And as far as I know, the cops didn't stop him or anything. So like, it's worth mentioning that like, if selling is your goal, there are sort of madcap ways you can do it. And I'll mention another person, Joe Chapetta, who early on in the early 90s, like we were all just like punk kids. We were like kind of self-effacing and quiet. We weren't really good at but we wanted to meet friends and be with each other and stuff. Joe Chapetta, he would have a rolly bag with him at all times with the books on top, like sort of like propped up, and he would sell them to everybody he met in the hall, in the bathroom. He would just like be, do you have my comic? Have you seen my comic? Just like relentless, but he would also sell comics. So like if selling is your goal, you probably can do it. And there are probably things, there are probably probably a lot of methods you can learn from. A lot of people that go with the goal of selling realize like people like merch more than comics these days. So they go with a lot of
Mhm.
prints. They go with a lot of pretty things that people can put on their wall or on their backpacks and things like that. And maybe they're less interested in the story that you spent 3 years on, but they're definitely interested in the print that you printed on your printer. um, yeah, anyway, that's some ideas about selling, but we can keep going.
There, I
You
was
know,
just thinking, I started watching this series called Documentary Now that has a lot of great comedians in it, like Bill Hader and Fred
mhm.
Armisen. And they have a skit called The Globesman about door-to-door salesmen who sell globes, I think in the 40s. And so they're wearing hats. And I think Fred Armisen's character is like on a losing streak and can't make a sale, and he makes a big scene. There's all these like, and then there's also this like Atlas seller, door-to-door Atlas seller that's kind of their nemesis, and
Oh, nice.
it's like such a goofy thing, and it's a kind of like a period piece. A lot of the things in there riff on an era of documentary style. There's one that's a lot like Stop Making Sense too. That's Fred Armisen plays the David Byrne kind of character. It's totally unhinged and really, really delightful and irreverent, but it made me feel so much better about not being able to sell stuff. But I don't know if there was like a clear resolution for that, but what you're saying kind of reminded me of that. I think I would if the idea of going to a convention terrifies you or excites you, kind of figure out why those reasons are and what you're looking for. I think going or investigating or thinking about going. I feel like every year of like a month before MoCA, all my cartoonist friends in New York when I lived there would be like, "Are you going to MoCA? Do you have a table?" So early on, people would be like, "Do you have a table? Do you want a table? Let's table together." And then closer to the date, they're like, "Are you going? Do you have anything? Are you going to make a comic?" So it's certainly generates buzz in your social circle or vice versa, where you can kind of, oh, well, my friend's making a comic, maybe I should make one, or they're tabling and I can put some of my work on their table. So it's kind of a way to reconnect with people if you do have friends already, but you haven't seen them in a while, even locally. It's kind of like a cool way to connect again. But sometimes I feel like the older I get, when someone was like, "Hey, you're going to this festival," if you've been a few times, maybe it lost its luster. And then I think I mentioned this on a different podcast, but Carlo and I were working the saw table at MoCA last year, and I just felt so old because everyone had like very beautiful skin. Not that, I mean, mine looks okay, but yeah, just people like way younger than me. And I was like, where did they come from? Leonie was on that call and was like, does anyone else feel like very elder statesman-ish at conventions? So I'm waiting for there to be a convention for old cartoonists. Can we start one, Tom? Me and you.
Yeah,
CroneCon. Come on, Donna would love that.
that's some other call. I'm not sure I
Okay,
want
okay, okay. We're thinking about it, generating an idea. But
to.
you're never too old or too young to go to a convention.
No, I want to talk about a couple other things. Like there are there's in building up the desire to go to a con or festival, and sometimes like you really build to like really be noticed, and to sell things and sell 100 copies. Nobody, not enough people took my postcard. But then you go back and you realize like, oh, I had a couple really great conversations. I met this person, we traded zines, and you realize that you did have a good time. You just didn't have a good time compared to what you thought this should do, right? You thought this was going to be like this magnificent, explosive moment in your career or whatever. Where finally you're recognized for your genius or whatever. But really, they're just, again, they're ways to sort of tighten up your community and your network and reaffirm it and connect with people. It's just the belle of the ball thing that sort of happens, which is most conventions, there's usually like one book that everybody's talking about. And you also want to be that book, but I never have been. But I remember one year in Angoulême in France, one of them was by Nick Bertozzi, a friend of mine, and he'd done a comic about mapping the New York, I'm sorry, the Texas-Mexico border, and he did it in a map form. So it was just like early 2000s, maybe even late 90s, where funny printing wasn't that common. So, and the fact that it was this unfolded map blew everyone away. And it was also really cheap because he got it done at a map printing place. It was really cheap. So like everybody was walking around with this map in France, this map comic. It was a comic, a story. So he was sort of the belle of the ball that year. And it's pretty fun to sort of like sometimes plan for like, well, how can I make a splash? What weird thing can I do? Keith Knight used to have a giant paper mache head about 2 times the size of his own head. So like it looked like him, except it was twice as tall, and he'd wear it, and everyone remembered it. I don't think he brings it around anymore because now he's just Keith Knight. But for a while, that was his way of like making people notice him. And so everybody these days has like, a bowl of candy or something out because they want you to stop and notice their table. And you're like, "Ooh, Skittles." You do that. But there are really grand ways if you want to be grand and if you want to try and capture attention. But if
There
you
can
if
be
you
small grand gestures too, like my friend Adam at Mice last year, I think a year before, he had a tiny half table, and he made his table look like a table setting. It had a plate and a plastic wine glass
oh, nice.
and knives, and he had a zine on the plate, I think, and it was so marvelous to look at because the format of all these tables is sort of similar. There's a tablecloth, there's stuff on top of it. Sometimes people have really elaborate shelving or pop-up things behind them. Like some of it can look very professional. So I like that he did this lo-fi approach. I think he had like plastic fruit or something. It was so cool.
That's great. I'm always jealous, but mostly because my mind doesn't work this way, but I'm always jealous of other people's signage, their arrangement of their displays. I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? And then I write it down and I lose the piece of paper I wrote it down. And then the next happens and our presentation isn't any better. Um, that's kind of a bummer. But that's related to one other thing I want to mention, which is a good rule of thumb, which is it's really good to just have like a go bag, like a box or a briefcase or a duffel bag with your convention stuff and just leave it packed, right? And so that includes your whatever shelving that you've managed to figure out works for you, whatever signage, all your cards and flyers and things that you want to hand out, a certain number of books, whatever tablecloths and things like that. And because packing at the last minute and trying to remember and not having a checklist is like the worst thing. At the very least, have a checklist and just make a week in advance. But it's really good. And you can search for, they're really organized cartoonists. I'm not one of them, but they're really organized cartoonists who like online will be like, here's what I take to conventions. That's mapped out in this beautiful, like Richard Scarry, like sort of system. So that's a really good, that's an important piece of advice, I think. Um, and yeah, go to zine fairs, go to the small things. Oh, you know what? I think one other thing is worth mentioning, but every single author, um, every single popular musician in their backstory, just read their biographies. There's a handful of like, yeah, I played a cafe to one person, or I did a book signing and it was just me, the bookseller and their 8-year-old, like everybody's got stories like that. So if that happens to you, it's not uncommon. It's okay.
It means you've made it as a cartoonist. They're like, oh, I sold 2 copies.
I mean,
But maybe at the end of the weekend, you're like,
And
man, I didn't sell anything, but where did this hickey come from? And like, it's like that song by Katy Perry, Friday Night. You're like, I don't know what just happened, but it was probably good.
I don't know that song.
Oh, it's very silly. It's anyway. It's basically it's an anthem for binge drinking, which we don't recommend.
Oh,
But though some people do to get through the conventions, the social anxiety. So I don't know. There are different types of creators that do different things. And Tom's right that uh, maybe you're hoping to make a splash, but it becomes this infamous story of before people knew you for the genius that you are today, you played to a crowd of one plus an 8-year-old. Um, and like, yeah, there's lots of good. I would say I've never had like an absolutely awful experience at a convention. Everyone that's there generally wants everyone else to have a good time, and we're all on the ship that's sinking together.
right,
So
right.
we're trying to make the most out of it. Like people have invested a lot of hope and time and energy and money into making it out and dressing fancier than usual or wearing a paper mache head more often than usual. Yeah, just doing something different. I think it's good to do these things occasionally, even if it feels like a stretch for you socially, just to see what's out there, and I think you learn about yourself too, like what you're drawn to and repelled by. So I think it's similar. My stance on conventions is similar to social media. They're like, you don't have to if you don't want to, if it's weird and overwhelming. I do find like when I stand behind a table for 2 or 3 days, I get like motion sickness, like I have to go out. So if you're tabling with a friend, I can be like, hey Tom, will you watch the table? I'm gonna go walk around. And then it's funny, it's like this your friend becomes your receptionist and like, oh well you're away. Your friend Emma came by and she left you this note. And I'm like, oh I gotta find her. So I don't know, there's these funny little things that happen that are really quite wonderful.
Or you could have sold 5 copies, but all these people wanted a
Yeah,
copy,
who
but
did
you
I
weren't there, and
miss?
now they're gone.
Yeah, then you could really mess with them. Like Tom, the art director for Drawn and Quarterly was here, but you were in the bathroom and I told them that you hate them, so you're not gonna buy your book. Is there anything else about tabling we missed? I don't know. I'm kind of being sort of topical, but
Um, I would say I would say that the general rule of thumb, if you do want to, if you are showing up for the first time, if you're if you want to be a person who really does belong, it does probably take a little bit of extroversion. And I speak as a terrible introvert. Me and Emma will sit at a table, like, first of all, don't sit, stand, right? So there are some rules of thumb that will get you a little bit more of the attention you probably want when you're going to a festival. Stand up, talk to people in a welcoming way as they pass by. Give them some breathing room, but welcome them into your conversation. Don't say, "Here's my comic, I made it, and it's $6." Ask them about something going on in their life. Ask them something in their hand. Ask them, you know, if you have a particular, uh, if you have a particular, what I would say, topic that your comic is about, you might be able to reach them that way. Like if you're, like, I tabled once next to Anna Selheim, and actually this gets into something which is it's probably good to have a patter, but you're going to annoy everyone around you. But you just have to suck it up. And Anna had this patter, and I was like, and I was so annoyed by it after a while. And it was about dogs because her comics were about dogs. And then I realized, like, why am I so annoyed? She's a great salesperson. Like she's reaching out to these people, and she's asking them if they have dogs, and expressing in this really like nice, concise way her exasperation with her own dog. And she just gets it across in like 7 seconds or something. I had to hear it 100 times. and and then afterwards, that's when I became friends with her. I was like, Anna, you're like a salesperson and you're a really good cartoonist. But
amazing.
that weekend I was
Yeah,
like,
or like
oh, I can't hear about the dogs anymore.
Sally was mentioning like, oh, it's good to have like a sales pitch ready to go, but also like just having a one-liner about your work. Like people are like, oh, what is this? Oh, I've been interviewing veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars for comics, and here it is. So like, and that if I feel like if you have one sentence, it's just easier to talk about your work. But you're like dogs, am I right? That sounds really great.
Dogs, am I right? Yeah, I mean, obviously, the lower the common denominator, the easier it's going to be to reach everybody, right? And so, like, dogs, am I right, is one step up above cats, am I right? And that'll work. Most people, even me, I'm like, oh man, cats, yeah, right. You know? Um, and but yeah, but like, it's a few different, it the your audience self-selects a little, it gets a little smaller as things go.
feel like I
I
should
know.
retitle this podcast the fine art of small talk or something.
Yeah, sure. Or
Tom's looking for a book, I think.
I am. Well, I'm
I
looking.
just remember going for like a medical exam in 2021, and the tech was like, "So how's your pandemic been going?" And I like laughed so hard. So you can always be like, "Hey, how's the convention going?" Or like, "Oh, what's that?" Like a lot of people will be carrying stuff that they bought, and you can be like, "Oh, wow, that looks amazing," or and then hear more about where they're from or what they like. It's pretty easy to talk to people even if you don't do that. Tom, what'd you find? Show us what you found.
Jim Hamilton's Falling.
Yay!
Thank you, Jim, for sending me this.
Falling
It
by
is
Jim
so
Hamilton, out now via
uh-huh.
Mixum.
Scan the UPC code and order it. But also, like, behind a table, you can be like, "Have you ever fallen out of a plane?" You can say that to somebody. No, I have a book of 60 people who have fallen out of planes. Or, I'm not sure how many. I'm not sure. There's probably you would test it out over time. You'd be like, no, that wasn't the right line. The right line is more
Oh,
specific.
it'd
The
be
right
man, I
line
just had
involves like, what kind of clothes would
I
you wear
had
if you were
this
falling out of a
vision.
plane? And then somebody's like, oh, I would wear.
I had this vision where like Jim sends long fall survivors copies of his book and they review it and blurb it and they're like, this is pretty good. Like I'm gonna give it like 4 parachutes out of 5. Or Tom's like, I haven't fallen out of anything higher than a bunk bed, but I was really enthralled the entire 200 pages. Could be good. We're your
The
marketing team now.
but right, yeah. Let's keep going because, like, actually, like, if you were able to buy like tiny little parachuters and you would give those out to people, like, that would be, that's your
Yeah,
conversation starter,
get
and you would get
get
a
those
lot of people.
army men and only get the parachute ones and put them all
Right.
over your table and then like hand them out as goodies and people are like, what is this? My toddler's gonna choke on it. I love it. We're so excited. I can't wait to see Jim at Mice or wherever. He has a book event. I don't think it's happened yet. Is it this weekend or did I miss it already?
Jim can put it in the chat.
Yeah, put it in the chat, please.
March.
Yeah, all the parachutes deployed, or they didn't, and somehow via miracle, we've all survived. So, how do I tie this together? Conventions are a lot like falling, and hopefully we will all survive.
What can you do in that like 14 minutes that you have before hitting the earth? Uh,
Yeah,
I don't
hopefully I have
know.
like more time
Like
to plan. Have that
huge
go back, the parachute equivalent, really.
Jim's event is March 24th in Duxbury, Massachusetts. Um,
At 4
all right.
p.m., First Baptist
So
Church.
thank you for talking about festivals and other things, zine fairs and things. This was fun. What's our next topic? Do we know?
We don't know. It's going to be 10, so we're officially in the double digits, which is exciting. But I have to refer to the manuscript and see what we're missing. So my goal for this week for writing
Okay.
the book was to fill in all the blank spaces, which I did, but it's absolute gibberish. So I have to go
Okay.
back and see if any of it's what parts do I need help with.
First draft. Um,
What's that?
I said shitty first draft. Isn't
Oh
that
yeah,
Anne
for
Lamott
sure.
statement?
Yeah,
Yeah.
making the bad draft as quickly as possible. Jim had a quick question before I go. What do you wear for tabling? I assume you are wearing saw swag. If you're
That's a
representing
good question
saw,
because
we wear actual saw blades as necklaces
Emma and I
around.
was talking about it because the problem is we have a lot of saw t-shirts, but it's always cold in those convention centers. So you wear the saw
Mhm.
t-shirt and then you put a sweater over it and you're no longer wearing saw gear. So we need to order some like long and hoodies and things like that. But it's not going to happen before Mocha, but maybe it'll happen before SPX.
That sounds good. I tend to wear
Um,
comfy shoes because, like Tom says, it's good to stand, right? So
oh
comfy
yeah.
shoes. I bring a big bottle of water, snacks, walk around. I usually wear like a comfy t-shirt and then a nice blazer. If I'm trying to sell something, I try to dress like an art director. But if I'm like, I don't know, when I was younger and more hungover, a lot of flannel was sort of like a blazer. Oh yeah, or a hoodie, zipper front saw hoodie, please. Sally will buy from our next tabling. Maybe we just sell
Yeah,
hoodies.
we
It's
will.
down in the back of Tom's car outside of SBX. Are you cold at SBX? Buy our hoodie.
All right, Jess. So next week, well, who knows? We'll talk more about how to feel better while making comics, while selling comics, while dreaming of comics, while trying to crack the codes, right?
Yeah, we'll do all that.
Right?
Episode 10,
Am I
of
frozen
course.
or are you
Tom and I will
frozen?
be here. Yep. Yep. It's all
All
true.
right. Well, all right. So actually, and last week to sign up for Jess's Bootlegger's Guide to Freelancing course, that's at learn.sawcomics.org. Lots more things. Graphic novel program is starting in June. If you're interested in that, that's at learn.sawcomics.org. You can find us on the socials at Saw Comics, or Comics Workshop, actually, more often than not, it's Comics Workshop.
And at
And
conventions. What's the next convention we're going to be at, Tom?
okay, it starts Saturday. It's 2 days.
You're going to be at Mocha?
With Elise Dietrich. And we definitely know some people are going to be stopping by, and I'm really excited to meet some. I think Adrian Clark's going to be there and stuff like that.
Awesome.
All
Okay,
right.
so we'll
Thank
see
you,
you
everybody. We'll
virtually
see you
and
next
IRL.
week. All right. See everybody next week at Terrible Anvil. Thanks for joining us. This has been a production of the Sequential Artists Workshop, or SAW. You can find us on social media at Comics Workshop and online at sawcomics.org. You can hear about our many courses at learn.sawcomics.org. SAW is a nonprofit and supported by people like you. Learn how to make a tax-deductible donation at the donate page of sawcomics.org. You can join our free community of comics explorers at members.sawcomics.org. Thanks so much for being here.